Hello YouTubers, this is Gold Standard 924 coming at you with another video. The Royal Rumble's coming this Sunday, so I figured I'd be making a video, regarding some of the past Royal Rumbles. Um, Now this will be somewhat different because it's not going to be me reviewing on a particular Royal Rumble pay-per-view, but just, the 30 participants and, the 30-man Royal Rumble matches themselves. So, for this video, I'll be discussing about the Royal Rumble 1994 as well as the 2004 Royal Rumble matches. So don't expect just a review on the pay-per-views in general, but just more like the actual match that happens every year. So without further ado, let's get started. So Royal Rumble 1994, as far as the match itself goes, was pretty much a big transitional period for the WWE. So Hulk Hogan had left around the summer of 1993, and Yokozuna won that world title from Hulk Hogan. So Yokozuna had been holding that belt for nearly over a year now, and while all that was going on, Bret Hart spent most of 1993, winning the King of the Ring tournament and having a program and feud with Jerry the King Lawler. And then on the other side, you had Lex Luger, who was portrayed as the all-American hero, and he was kind of portrayed as a little bit of an inspiration behind Hulk Hogan. So Lex Luger was basically picking up the pieces that Hulk Hogan left behind, and so Bret Hart and Lex Luger going into this match were the odds-on favorites to win the Rumble, and like I discussed, this was like a really big transitional period. So you had Macho Man Randy Savage, which would sadly be his last Royal Rumble match he ever participated in. Rest in peace, Macho Man. And it wasn't until the end of 1994 when he went over to WCW with Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake and a lot of other WWF wrestlers that jumped ship. Um, so it was one of those. It was really the time when WWF started to emphasize more on the younger guys, the less muscular wrestlers, and that weren't jacked up. And this was actually about a year or not too long after the steroid trials. So eventually, this kind of the WWE just really transitioned it from the rock and wrestling era to what we know as the new generation. So eventually, this kind of laid the foundation and the groundwork for WrestleMania 10, and Royal Rumble was the pay per view to kick things off. So as for the Royal Rumble match, it started off with Scott Steiner, who was one half the Steiner brothers at the time, and Samu, who was one half the Head Shrinkers. So you have these two guys that represented their respective tag teams, and they started off the Rumble match, and Owen Hart also had an appearance here, and he had turned on Bret Hart earlier that night, and Diesel, who would turn out to be the MVP of the Rumble match, eliminating 7 wrestlers. And at that time, Diesel had one of the largest amount of eliminations up until Stone Cold came along with 10 eliminations in 1997, and Kane also beat him by 11 in 2001. But at the time, Diesel was just sort of a force to be reckoned with. He was kind of like the Iron Man, um, or at least the second Iron Man, because wait a minute, scratch that. Bam and Big O actually lasted quite the longest, about like 30 minutes. Um, but Diesel, had a lot of eliminations. So I mean, uh, done. He's been pretty one of those guys that really made the Rumble a lot unique. Um, but eventually, Diesel didn't win the Rumble. He got eliminated by a lot of the WWF guys. So yeah, Diesel, he performed pretty well, but eventually he got eliminated, so he didn't get to win. Um, and then Bob Backlund also made an appearance as well, so it was nice to see him there. Um, yeah, so it was pretty a pretty significant Rumble also because it turns out that Bret Hart and Lex Luger were declared co-winners of that Royal Rumble match. And this was something that wasn't done before because normally Royal Rumble matches they tend to usually have like one winner. So eventually, 1994 sort of broke that rule a bit when Bret Hart and Lex Luger threw each other over the ropes simultaneously and landing at ringside. So then you had like Jack Tunney, who was like the WWF commissioner at the time, just really coming out there and just declaring like the final result. So then Howard Finkel came up on the mic and said that Bret Hart and Lex Luger would be the co-winners of that Royal Rumble. So and Bret Hart and Lex Luger, as far as that's concerned, they didn't do triple threat matches at the time. As far as WWE at that time goes, they never did a triple threat, and it was pretty unheard of. So what they did instead, because that they won the Rumble match, is that they did like this little coin toss to see who would challenge Yokozuna first. So at WrestleMania 10, Lex Luger fought Yokozuna, so he had to, Yokozuna had to do double duty, and Bret Hart had his thing with Owen Hart, so Bret Hart and Lex Luger had to wrestle more than once. Um, Actually, Lex Luger only wrestled once technically, but Bret Hart had to wrestle twice, and as well as Yokozuna. So apologize for my mistake there. So eventually, we all know that Bret Hart ended up winning the WWE title from Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10, and that really started the whole new generation period officially. So Royal Rumble 1994, it's a very solid match. It didn't really have a whole lot of top names. Just a couple of other veterans like Greg Valentine, Bob Backlund, um, and Macho Man Randy Savage as well. How could I forget him? So yeah, you had like three veterans that were in the Rumble match, and sadly, by this point, a lot of the wrestlers from the Rock and Wrestling era were basically gone by this point. Randy Savage did a lot of commentary before he left, so he didn't really do a whole lot of wrestling by this point, which is quite unfortunate. But what can you do? So Royal Rumble 1994, like I said, just a very solid match. I really enjoyed it. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much Royal Rumble 1994 there. Now we get to like 10 years later. So Royal Rumble 2004, the match that never really happened. And we all know the story. Chris Benoit was put at number one by Paul Heyman. So Benoit had to outlast 29 other competitors, and Benoit ended up winning the Royal Rumble match. Um, Now we all know the story that Benoit did what he had to do, and it wasn't very how I would describe it. So Chris Benoit, we all know that whole double murder suicide, and it was just really, it was just the fact that Benoit did what he did was just very disgusting, and nowadays WWE just doesn't really acknowledge him as much. Um, so eventually, the Royal Rumble match happened. Benoit was number one, Randy Orton was number two, and so they started off the Rumble match. Um, and you also had Kane coming out there, and then like Undertaker started playing mind games. So Kane's distraction ended up costing him to lose the Rumble match, so he got eliminated. Um, and then you also had like Ernest the Cat Miller, who was coming out to this what would turn out to be Brothers Clay's theme. Um, that was pretty hilarious looking back at it now, but I always associate that theme with Ernest Miller. Um, so yeah, Ernest Miller didn't last in the Rumble match that very long. So yeah, it was a pretty comical moment, especially when Taz was singing "Somebody Come on My Mind." So yeah, it was a pretty hilarious moment there. Um, Mick Foley, replacing Tess when he got beat up backstage. So yeah, this kind of really also started the program with Mick Foley and Randy Orton when like Orton punt kicked Mick Foley, and then like Foley ended up getting his retaliation and eliminating himself along with Randy Orton. So that started their feud. Um, and it was kind of, and they didn't do it at WrestleMania 20. They did it at Backlash. So it was kind of weird to think that something like that would happen. Um, and what else? And we all know it was really the Royal Rumble match that really tried to set out a lot of the programs going to WrestleMania. So yeah, Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. Brock Lesnar costing Goldberg the elimination. Um, let's see, and when Chris Benoit won the Rumble, like I discussed, when he eliminated Big Show using the side headlock, and yeah, throwing him out of the match. Yeah, so the underdog ended up winning the Rumble, and this was also another thing that was significant. So Chris Benoit went over to Raw and challenged the World Heavyweight Champion Triple H at the time. So instead of challenging their brand's champions, so instead that Benoit went over to Raw and challenged the champion from another brand. Um, so that was another historic moment that probably won't be remembered for numerous reasons. Especially Chris Benoit and the way that he went out in the end. Um, but it is what it is. So Royal Rumble 2004 match was actually, for its time, was really compelling. It really advanced a lot of storylines and even started up programs like I discussed. But it's going to be a Royal Rumble match that's forever going to be tainted. So it's really unfortunate, but hey, it's WWE. It's totally understandable. So Benoit, can't forgive him for what he did. So really ashamed. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on those particular Royal Rumble matches. I apologize if I came off pretty monotone halfway through the video, but just hearing a lot of voices, I easily get distracted whenever I make videos. So I apologize on my behalf there. But that's basically it for this video. So hope you enjoy this year's Royal Rumble if you happen to be watching it. So that's basically it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Till next time, this is Gold Standard 00924 signing out.